Now let's talk about the search parameter. Search parameters are like URL parameters, but they sit in a different position in the URL. Instead of being in the normal URL separated by forward slashes, they are at the end after a question mark. You have seen them across the web, something like this. React Router makes it easy to read and manipulate search parameter with useSearchParams function. It works a lot like React useState, but store and set the state in the URL search parameter instead of the memory. Let me show you what I want to say. At the top, right up here, I'm going to first import a hook, which is useSearchParam. And we're going to grab this hook from React Router DOM. So we are using this hook to create the search params inside this application. Now, let me just get rid of this unwanted previous lecture code right from here, something like this. And now what I want to use this useSearchParams hooks inside this invoice component. So right down here, I'm going to say let, and in the array, you're going to destructure two values. First is the variable, so we call here search params, and second is the set search params. And then I'm going to specify this useSearchParams as a hook. So this hook is going to destructure two values inside an array. First is a search parameter, and second is set search parameters. That's upon you. You can specify any name to these variables. Now this array is just like the useState. The first is the variable and the second is a function. So let's suppose if I console.log these search params. Let me save the changes. Oops, I think I misspelled here. I need to specify here this color. Save this. Let me open my console and reload the browser. You can see I'm going to get here a response inside this console. I'm going to get here URL search parameter, and we don't have any value inside this object. We didn't set any value using this set search parameter. So you can notice here the default value of this URL search parameters is an empty object. Now what I want to search through all these links using input text box. So right down here, just out of this div, here I'm going to say input. This is a type of text, and then I'm going to add some attributes here. So we first specify here class name, border, width is going to be 3x4, and mx is going to be auto. And then I'm going to add margin top 5. Let me save this. So I'm going to have this input text box here. You can notice just out of that. Let me add here a placeholder. Placeholder is going to be search invoice. Just out of that, I'm going to specify value to this input text box. Now, because I want to access the value of the search parameter and specify that to this input text box, that is why I specify value attribute to this input text box. So what I want to specify value of this search parameter to this input text box. That is why here I'm going to call value, and then inside these curly braces, here I'm going to say search params, this variable dot get. Using this get method, you can get the value from the search params. So I'm going to call here get and pass here parenthesis. You have to specify name. I'm going to specify name filter. And then I'm going to say here, if this value is not available, then I'm going to return nothing. Just out of that, right down here, I'm going to say on change. So I'm going to call here on change event handler. Now, just out of that, right up here, let me get rid of this console.log and create a simple event handler here. So I'm going to say here function on input change, and don't forget to pass here event parameter, because using this event parameter, we can access the value of this input text box. So let me first pass here on input change like this handler function. Let me call here a command and say input handler function, and right down here I'm going to say let filter is equal to event dot target dot value. Now this statement is going to return the value of this input text box inside this variable. Just down here, I'm going to say if we have filter, if we have value inside this filter variable, then return if statement, otherwise return else statement. So in the if statement, I'm simply going to say set search parameter. I'm going to call this function set search parameter, this set search parameter is going to allow us to specify value, or you can say create a value inside this variable. So I'm going to call here set search parameter, and inside this I'm going to call an object and say here filter. Now as you know, you get this value from the get method. If you scroll down, we specify here .get and specify the variable name, which is filter. You have to specify the same name inside this set search parameter. Just for that, what if you don't have any value inside this input text box? In that case, we call this set search parameter and get rid of this filter from here. So we pass the default value to this function when we don't have any value inside this search box. Now just for that, right down here, let me just say console.log and call here search params. Let me save the changes. When I reload the browser and type something inside this input text box, oops, I think I misspelled something. Cannot read properties of undefined value. Right here. Oops, I think I misspelled here. It's a target. Let me save the changes, reload the browser, and now when I type something here, I'm going to get the search parameter as a response. But you can notice inside this URL, I have here a question mark, and after that, I'm going to get the filter, the variable name, and its value. You can see filter is a key which we set here, and we specify value to it of this input text box. So whatever we type here, I'm going to have that value inside this URL. And now I can use this value to filter the links. So let's see how to do it. Let me get rid of this console.log, save this file, reload the browser. And now you can see when I reload the browser, I'm still going to have this value inside this text box. This is because now I'm getting this value from the parameter. Now, just out of that, what I want to get this parameter search value and filter these links. To do that, right down here, just out of this input text box, right down here, I'm going to call an object. And inside this, I'm going to say invoices. Let me just call all the invoices variable dot filter. And what I want to filter is, I want to filter the name. I want to search all this list by its name. So if you back to the data, then you can see I'm going to have here a name property. So I'm going to just back to the invoices, and right down here inside this filter, I'm going to first iterate over invoice. So this will iterate over all the object using this callback function. Inside this invoice, we can access all the properties of this object. Just for that, right down here, I'm going to say let filter is equal to search params dot get. And what I want to get is, I want to get the filter variable, this one. So I'm going to specify that filter here. Just out of that, right down here, I'm going to say if I don't have any value inside this filter, then return true. But if I have value inside this filter, then I'm going to say let name is equal to invoice dot name. I'm going to access this value, this one, dot, and then I'm going to say here to lowercase. I'm going to convert this value into lowercase. And just out of that, at the end, I'm going to return name, this variable, dot start with, and inside this function, I'm going to return filter dot to lowercase. So I'm going to get this input text box value inside this variable, convert that into lowercase, then I'm going to get the name from this object, convert that into lowercase, and using this start with function, I'm going to just return that object. So what we are going to do is, if this link starts with S, then I'm going to filter that object and return from this function. And just for that, instead of these invoices, now I can call map directly this chain. So right down here, I can say dot map like this, invoice, and then I can return this nav link, this one. So grab this nav link and specify that right here. Something like this. Let me get rid of this statement. Save these changes. Get rid of this parameter value. And now if I try to search for this ocean, if I type here O, then you can see it will automatically filter that link for me. And at the top, you can see the filter is equal to O. And if I search for wind open space, if I type W, I'm going to have that value. If I type here S, I'm going to have two links starts with S. So what we have done here, the use search parameter is now returning the URL search parameter with filter as one of its value. We set that value to the input whenever it's filter the search param. But keep in mind, the search parameter value is not stored in a memory. Instead, it's stored in the URL. So this is how you can easily filter your invoice. Now, when you click on the invoice, it will display the invoice, but reset the search params. Let me show you. If I click on the invoice, you can see it will reset the URL, and we have to search for the same invoice again. Now, let's see how to solve this problem.